Hi everyone, good day ma'am. Welcome to another educational video reporting by the Big Four of the Capital Market class with me, Carl Joshua Arboladura, and together with Miss Cassandra Arcamo, Miss Jonalinda Bodyongan, and Miss Maylin Caranzo. In today's report, we will be discussing the exchange rate system of the Philippines.
Dollar bills, won't you falling for me? I love the way that feels. Dollar bills, keep on falling for me. I love the way it feels. I came here to drop some money, dropping all my money. Drop some money, all this stuff so yummy, yeah.
Good day to you, ma'am. I'm Cassandra Jericamo, and I will be discussing the key definitions and concepts of the exchange rate, that is, how the exchange rate is defined, why the exchange rate is important, and how the exchange rate is determined. So, how is the exchange rate defined? The exchange rate is the price of a unit of foreign currency in terms of the domestic currency. In the Philippines, for instance, the exchange rate is conventionally expressed as the value of $1 in peso equivalent. For example, $1 is equivalent to 50 pesos. In every exchange rate quotation, therefore, there are always two currencies involved. So why is the exchange rate important? The exchange rate is important for several reasons. First, it serves as the basic link between the local and the overseas market for various goods, services, and financial assets. Using the exchange rate, we are able to compare prices of goods, services, and assets quoted in different currencies. Exchange rate movements can affect actual inflation as well as expectations about future price movements. Changes in the exchange rate tend to directly affect domestic prices of imported goods and services. A stronger peso lowers the peso prices of imported goods as well as import-intensive services such as transport, thereby lowering the rate of inflation. For instance, an increase in the value of the peso from $1 that is 50 pesos to $1 that is 40 pesos will lower the price of a $1 per liter gasoline from 50 pesos to 40 pesos. Exchange rate movements can affect the country's external sector through its impact on foreign trade. An appreciation of the peso, for instance, could lower the price competitiveness of our exports versus the products of those competitor countries whose currencies have not changed in value. The exchange rate affects the cost of servicing on the country's foreign debt. A peso appreciation reduces the amount of pesos needed to buy foreign exchange to pay interest and maturing obligations. How is the exchange rate determined? Under the system of freely floating exchange rates, the value of the dollar in terms of the peso is determined in the interbank foreign exchange market by the forces of supply and demand, just like any commodity or service being sold in the market. Under a fixed exchange rate system, a par value rate is set between the peso and the dollar by the central bank. The par value may be adjusted from time to time. Now I will give you Ms. Jonalinda Bodyongan for the discussion of the next key definitions and concepts. Thank you.
As a continuation of Cassandra's report, I will tackle about how exchange rates change, the country's foreign exchange policy, and how foreign exchange is traded in the market. So how does exchange rate change? So there are two exchange rate systems used by our country. First is the floating exchange rate system, and second one is the fixed rate system. So under a floating exchange rate system, if more dollars are demanded than are offered, then the price of the dollar in terms of Philippine peso will tend to increase. That is, it will cost more pesos to acquire $1. If on the other hand, if more dollars are offered than are demanded, the price of the dollar in terms of Philippine peso will tend to decrease. That is, it will cost less pesos to acquire $1. On the other hand, or in contrast, we have the fixed rate system wherein the exchange or the change in the exchange rate is affected through an official announcement by the central bank. So For example, let's say for example, Miss Sparkle is an owner of a bread factory. So, kitahay wala siya mapalit nga product diri sa Philippines or raw product diri sa Philippines. That's why mo import or mo palit siya dadto sa laing lugar. Let's say for example US. If the currency sa US is taas kaysa sa Philippines, mo acquire gyud na siya og more pesos para makapalit siya sa iyahang gusto nga product. So next, what is the country's foreign exchange policy? At present, the country's exchange rate policy supports a freely floating exchange rate system whereby the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas leaves the determination of the exchange rate to the market forces. Under a market-determined exchange rate framework, the BSP does not set the foreign exchange rate, but instead allows the value of the peso to be determined by the supply of and demand for foreign exchange. So, if mabantayan ninyo or nakabantay mo nga ang exchange rate sa other currencies diri sa Philippines changes every day or fluctuates, for example, every 2 weeks or every 2 days, ang reason ana is dira nagsunod ang Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas sa floating exchange rate system. Thus, the BSP participation in the foreign exchange market is limited to tempering sharp fluctuations in the exchange rate. On such occasions of excessive movements, the BSP enters the market mainly to maintain order and stability. So, maura man gyud na purpose sa BSP to maintain stability para mas stable and order. When warranted, the BSP also stands ready to provide some liquidity and ensure that legitimate demands for foreign currency are satisfied. So last, how is foreign exchange traded in the market? In the Philippines, banks trade foreign exchange using an electronic trading platform called the Philippine Dealing Exchange Corp or the PDEX through any of the following ways: Reuters or Bloomberg dealing, over-the-counter, or via brokers. The PDEX captures all spot transactions which involve the purchase or sale of a foreign currency for immediate delivery within 1 day, for example, within 1 day for US dollars and within 2 days for other convertible currencies, done through any of these transaction vehicles. When banks trade either for the clients or for their own accounts, they follow a set of guidelines laid by the BSP, the Manual of Regulations on Foreign Exchange Transactions as amended, Circular 471 dated January 24, 2005, and other applicable BSP applications or regulations to ensure orderly trades in the foreign exchange markets. So, we will not just tackle or dig deep to the Manual of Regulation of Foreign Exchange Transactions kay madugay gyud ta ana, and we still have other reporters for you para ma-explain nila ninyo how foreign exchange works in the Philippines. That's it. Thank you so much.
One way of judging the appropriate level of the exchange rate is by looking at the trend in the real effective exchange rate or REER of the peso versus a basket of currencies. These measures take into account not only the nominal exchange rate movements, by the way, but also the relative inflation rates among trading and competing countries. As such, the REER or REER is a more comprehensive measure of external price competitiveness. On March 26, 2013, the BSP released 3 new indices which measure the nominal and real effective exchange rates of the peso relative to the currencies of the following groups of countries. When we say indices, this pertains to signs or maybe indicators in measuring something. So the first one is all major trading partners, TPI, of the Philippines, covering merchandise exports and imports. Number 2, trading partners in advanced countries. And the third one is trading partners in developing countries. The methodology used for calculating the new indices was also revised as the BSP shifted from arithmetic to a geometric formulation from base year to chained indices. Starting 2014, the new indices replaced the old EER indices as the official effective exchange rate indices of the BSP. The new peso EER indices would enable the BSP to gauge more objectively to overall movements in the exchange rate of the peso across currencies. An increase in the indices means an overall appreciation of the peso and a consequent loss in external price competitiveness against the basket of currencies, while a decrease translates to a real depreciation and a corresponding gain in external price competitiveness. Volatility, from the root word volatile, means liable to change rapidly and unpredictably. One way of measuring the volatility of the peso is through the coefficient variation, or COV, which is the ratio of the standard deviation and the average exchange rate of the peso for a given period. These are all mathematical terms, and we have all encountered this already, I guess. I won't be discussing this part in full detail, but I will just give you hints of what to look out for. So a low coefficient of variation indicates a stable peso, while a high coefficient of variation reflects a volatile peso. The volatility of the peso's daily closing rates as measured by the coefficient of variation stood at 0.43 in the first quarter of 2020. This was lower than the 0.8 or 0.80% registered in the previous quarter. The volatility of the peso in the review quarter was lower than the volatility of most currencies in the region. So take note that what we are reporting to you right now are all based on the reports of BSP or from the BSP in the year 2020.
So the next topic is, why can't the BSP intervene more heavily during periods of high volatility? So heavy interventions cannot be sustained for a long period of time because it could create problems for monetary policy. To sterilize intervention and mop up excess liquidity, the central bank would have to either raise policy rates and/or undertakes open market operations. So these policy actions may not be sustainable because they are costly to central banks. High interest rates required to step on of liquidity would give countries with fiscal difficulties and/or weak macroeconomic conditions very little room for maneuver. Moreover, raising interest rates is likely to result in a further increase in foreign capital inflows, which may necessitate more sterilization, resulting in a vicious cycle. On the other hand, unsterilized intervention may lead to unwarranted monetary expansion and generate upward pressure on prices. This runs counter to a central bank's mandate to maintain price stability. So next topic is, what measures are undertaken by the BSP to maintain order and stability in the foreign exchange market? So, the BSP uses three general tools to operationalize the exchange rate policy. So first, participation in the foreign exchange market. The BSP participates by buying and selling foreign exchange market to ensure order and temper destabilizing swings in the exchange rate. It does not set out to reverse the underlying trend of the peso, whether it is appreciating or depreciating. Rather, its objective is to smooth out volatility in the exchange rates. Assume that there is an artificially strong demand for dollars which is causing the exchange rates to weaken. The BSP can suppress speculation by selling dollars to moderate the depreciating trend. If there is an artificially strong supply of dollars relative to demand in the market, the BSP can soften the appreciation of the peso by buying dollars. So second is monetary policy measures. If the exchange rate movement threatens to move inflation rate outside its target range, the BSP also uses monetary policy measures, including adjusting the key policy rates or the interest rates it charges for its borrowing and lending activities. For example, in periods of weakening pressure on the peso, increases in interest rates to tend dampen the demand for dollars. As a result, the depreciation pressure on the peso eases. However, any such interest rate action needs to be consistent with the price stability objective of the BSP. So, last tools, or the third, is the foreign exchange regulations. The BSP also combined foreign exchange interventions and monetary measures with market-based foreign exchange regulations to ensure stability in the foreign exchange market. For example, the BSP has been keeping FX regulations responsive through the liberation of FX rules with appropriate safeguards. So last topic is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of peso depreciation? A weak peso can improve the external price competitiveness of the Philippine products, thereby increasing the country's export earnings. The peso equivalent of OF remittances in foreign currencies will also increase, as the peso depreciation will mean more pesos in exchange of one foreign currency unit. Moreover, tourism and investment activities will increase, as it will be less costly and more desirable for foreigners to travel and invest in the Philippines. However, peso depreciation can also increase inflationary pressures as it would cost more pesos to buy imported products and raw materials such as oil and rice.